Welcome to VNfiniti,
the podcast where we talk
and you listen.
We're your hosts, Ashley
and Tori.
And welcome to today's show. We have a special guest with us today. Dwayne, how about you introduce yourself to our audience?
Hello, I'm Dwayne, founder of Impact is Inevitable, changing lives by changing minds. I am also a drug counselor for people on probation and parole.
And Dwayne, you're also an author, right? So you have a book that's out now. Actually, 2 books that are out.
My book is called The Audible. You can find that on Amazon, or you can go to www.dwayneijames.com.
And Dwayne is here today to discuss our topic, which is volume. So before we get into it, I'd like to kind of just read you a short definition of what volume is. So volume actually has two definitions. One, speaking of a form or a part of work of series, referring to kind of like the volume of books, whether it's a series of television or other film categories. And then we also have volume in the sense of the amount of space a substance or an object takes up. So both are kind of like hand in hand, and we're going to talk about how in our current lives we allow things and people to occupy space that may not be necessarily for them or for it. So let's get into it.
Okay, let's get into it.
So when it comes to things that are occupying our space, I kind of feel like my thoughts on it is kind of like when you're full, like when you eat too much food or too much junk. Yes, like some of those types of things, things that fill you up that may not necessarily be good for you. So you can fill up on, your mom always say don't eat all of your snacks or your junk food before you eat the nutritious stuff something of substance, and you fill up and you don't necessarily have room for it, and therefore your body is lacking. I think we do that in everyday life. Like, we fill up on junk.
So much stuff. So many things going on around us all day, every day.
So, Dwayne, I know that from a counseling standpoint, you see a lot of people that come in that fill up on things that are, even with drugs, that are fulfilling certain areas in their life, taking up space, taking up time, but maybe not fulfilling the necessary needs of their mental or their emotional needs, and taking up space. Like, how do you feel about life may treat you when you're filling up on unnecessary things?
In my experience, when people fill up their lives on unnecessary things, it just becomes a cycle. It's like a quick fix. So they never really get to the root of what the real issue is or what would take care of their problem, because after that drink, after that high, it comes right back. I kind of equate it to just stuff in your house. We see something, we like something, we think it'll add value to our life. And next thing you know, just a whole bunch of junk in the house. We don't even use it after a month. The love and the value for it has gone down, but yet we don't get rid of it. We collect it all.
And, kind of like hoarding.
Like, most definitely. So imagine one hoarding things in their mind. When you think about volume, everything has its capacity.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Everything.
And there's different levels to it. Like, there's dense things and there's lightweight things. So when you think about volume, you have that density, even from physics? From a physics level, you have the density levels that things take up space.
Sure.
So you could take water and it's not as dense, salt water, fresh water, and then you freeze it and it becomes different. It expands, it explodes something.
Yeah. Or think about dropping a marble in water. Like, it's small, it's heavy, but the impact can be a lot more than all the water surrounding it. So sometimes it's just how important or how significant one thing is. It may be small, but it can be so significant that it just changes the whole, the whole volume or the whole perspective, because it has so much weight.
Changing forms.
Yeah, that too. So when you when we allow things to take up volume, how do you feel like that impacts us in our longevity. I'm thinking about from a health standpoint. Like you can allow, for instance, stress takes up a lot of volume in our lives. And when you have a lot of stress on you, I can't even say the word. If you have a lot of stress on you, it can impact your health. Like it can
absolutely.
You down the line, you can have heart problems.
Start to have physical ailments.
Exactly.
Attached to your emotional ailments. So
the weight of lifting something like that can have volumes on your life, like your longevity of life, having from a mental health standpoint.
Sure.
And even from the people around you.
A lot of times what I see is people accumulate these things and they start to take away from other stuff. And so imagine being a parent, an employee, a student, just different things that you involve yourself in or responsibilities that you have. And then you introduce these different things like drugs, anxiety, mental health, or social media, video games that start to.
I didn't even think about.
Yeah, gambling. There's a lot of things.
Addiction.
Most definitely that take away from all the other responsibilities, all the things that you once found purpose in or need to have purpose in. It starts to affect all these different areas, and that speaks to the capacity of you can only have so much going on in that mind, and something has to give.
And it's truly part of like the definition. It says a substance or an object occupies a particular capacity. So that implies that we all have limits.
Right.
Like it's only so much that we can take before that capacity limit is reached. So when you're taking on massive things, whether it's stress or
all these different roles that you're fulfilling.
I mean, even from an energy level, I know when you give your energy to so much, it spreads you thin.
Absolutely.
And then that's when you invite stress. That's when you invite anxiety. Unknowingly, yeah.
It can be as small as sleep.
Oh,
because the lack of sleep is a big deal.
Right. You're tired, and the kids need to eat.
You just keep pushing.
You need to go somewhere, and you're not rested well. Yeah, like everything can be affected.
And I know I get angry when I'm asleep. I don't know about y'all out there, but I am one. Let somebody wake me up.
Sleep or hungry.
Hangry.
Yes. Nutrition.
Yes.
And hydration.
Yes. And all of those things go back to the health. So like if you're not sleeping well, you're not being productive for anyone else health wise. Like when you have allowed yourself to get to that max capacity, if we're talking from a volume level, and you allow it to affect those things, like you're hangry or you're not getting the nutrition that you need, and nutrition leads to you not sleeping well because now you're amping up on energy drinks,
all those things.
And then energy drinks lead to you not sleeping, right. And then it just creates that cycle. Right. And then I'm speaking on nutrition wise, but you also get in those cycles with drugs. Like you rely on the drugs to keep you awake, or you rely on the drugs to take off that anxiety, or you rely on the drugs to take off that stress level.
Sure.
And when I speak of drugs, I'm thinking of anything that you can substitute or become addicted to in order to balance out the volume of the world. Right.
And then a lot of times I think of it as like pouring water in a glass. Eventually it's going to spill over, and we can't always choose what falls out. So we might lose people, we might lose friends, we might lose ourselves. Sometimes we can't really choose or dictate what's gonna fall out that glass. All we know is it's a whole lot coming in. Something has to go, and it can affect people differently.
Sure.
Spouses leave, friendships are severed, health declines. So it's a lot of consequences if you're not really sifting out, all that stuff that's coming in and keeping all the good stuff.
And you were talking about a glass. I mean, I was thinking about it from a plate standpoint.
Okay.
Because I'm always hungry. I'm sorry. Okay. I love my food.
Taking up volume.
So, and we were talking about it from a nutritionist standpoint. When you have a plate of food, let's say you're plotting out your plate of food, and you have all these elements on your plate, and we from a metaphorical standpoint, when your plate is full and you can't get anything on it, you're again missing out on possible blessings.
You're not taking anything in.
Yeah. So you can't accept your blessings until you release some of those things that aren't well for you, aren't good for you.
Sure.
From a capacity standpoint.
Think about consumerism. You know, sometimes our eyes can be bigger than our stomach.
Oof.
And so we think we want all these things, and we just go after everything, and we can't handle it.
Yeah.
It's too much. We keep going. And sometimes it's that keep going, you know, you still got chest out. I can handle it. I can take care of this.
And it could be from a pride standpoint. You know, right. You can get it from a pride.
Most definitely.
It gets to a point where it's like, well, I asked for all of this, so I got to keep it.
Or I deserve it.
Oh, yeah. That guilt that goes into that.
Right.
Yeah.
I deserve this. I worked all week. You know, I've been doing this for so long.
That's true.
I deserve this.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then we force it on ourselves.
And then we stand back and we're like, oh, I don't have the energy for this. And it's something that's positive for yourself. Or, again, you lose out on those things. So, from a balance standpoint, how do you feel like we should balance those things that take up a lot of space, a lot of capacity, a lot of volume? And we're being very vague right now. And I would like to get into something a little deeper if we can. But how do you balance those types of things within your life? Whether it's relationships taking up a lot of volume, because we can get into let's get into relationships. And when I speak of relationships, I'm thinking of your family. Your family can take up a lot of volume.
Right.
Whether it's your parents, siblings. And these are people that you're not asking to be in your life. So a lot of times that guilt does come into play. Like, hey, like I am responsible for this. We take on a lot of that. And when we take on a lot of that, we leave out that room or that space for others to occupy.
Right.
So creating that balance in a relationship, and from a counselor standpoint, what do you see?
Typically, I say it's two things: self-care.
That's big. That's really big.
And reassessment. So as far as self-care, we got to take care of ourselves first. Otherwise,
there's nowhere to fill up.
We won't be shit for anybody else.
Yeah. There's no plate.
If we neglect ourselves, then we're going to burn out. And then you got to constantly reassess yourself and your situations. You can easily say, you know what, this will be good. I'm going to do X, Y, and Z. And then a month later, you can be like, you know what, this is taking away more than I thought it would. Maybe it's time to adjust or do something different because it didn't work out the way it was.
To me, you're speaking about boundaries. I'm really terrible at boundaries. Maybe I'll let us continue to go down this line until we get into other areas on how to create those balances and those boundaries.
Right. Self-care can be anybody's outlets that are productive and healthy and progressive. So it can be the gym, you can go work out, you can meditate, you can vacation just to get away for a little bit. Whatever you need to do to kind of recenter yourself and recharge yourself so you can kind of stay on that positive, that positive wavelength so you cannot go crazy. And then a lot of self-assessing is just asking yourself questions. How does this work for me? Is this working? How long do I think before I can reach my next goal? Is it the proper plan for the family, or is it just the proper plan for me? Like, so you got to constantly ask yourself those questions, because things change, even people change, mind changes. We know that,
and we get in people pleasing modes too. From a volume, I know from a volume standpoint, when we take on more than we can chew, sometimes that can be from an overachiever. because some people are overachievers. I'm one of those people. But it can also come from people pleasing and trying to make sure that you're maintaining or taking care of everyone else, besides, like you said, from a self-care standpoint.
And what if we take on more than we can chew unknowingly?
Oh, that's big too. Yeah.
Right. So, there can be a situation that presents itself and it looks one way. You're like, oh yeah, this will be fine. This will be good. And then you dive head first into it. And then, months down the line, it's like, you know what? I was sold a dream. How do I get out?
Smoke and mirrors.
Right. Smoke and mirrors. I was sold a dream. How the hell do I get out now? And so, now you got to ask yourself, am I going to pull this trigger and get out? Am I going to pull this trigger and say something? Because, a lot of people won't say anything.
No, they'll just drown. And
Exactly.
They'll wait on the stuff, like you said, from a cup standpoint. If you drop a marble in some water, they'll wait on it to spill over and call themselves even. Like, okay, well, that was meant to go. When in actuality, it may not have been meant to go. You're just over capacity and something had to go.
And you seen the red flag. Somebody threw you a life raft. Even the other person, the situation could have threw you a life raft, and you just ignored it.
Yep.
You didn't want to see it. You didn't want to take it. And so now you're in this situation where it has all accumulated, and now that water is at the brim.
And you at max capacity.
You at
max volume.
Yeah, that shit is about to run over. It is about to run over.
Personal story and standpoint, I sometimes deal with anxiety. And a lot of it I feel like is self-induced. I do take on more than I can chew. I did mention that I am a overachiever. Have always been an overachiever my entire life. But I spoke about boundaries before, and that's something that's really hard to achieve in today's society. I would say that because everything is so accessible. And so when you're talking about volume and what things take up, a lot of times we don't consider noise as part of that volume. So we talked about stress, we talked about relationships and people in our lives. Right. Even from a things standpoint, you have your job, you have your hobbies, all of those things can take up capacity or volume within your life. You have noise. Right. So when the noise gets too loud, how do you manage that? How you balance those types of things in a self-care situation or in a way in which you can create those boundaries?
I think the hard part is recognizing it. And I'll speak for myself. I can do a million things at a time, but I'm only taking baby steps in a million things. Instead of doing 5 things to completion. And I know for me, there's definitely been times where I didn't realize that I was in so many different places until
being so many things to so many people or things.
Right. And you always want to be in relationships that's give and take. Like I want to pour into somebody, I want somebody to pour into me. But when you think about extracurricular activities, like I was playing flag football. And you think of social media,
social media is one of the biggest.
Right.
Like it's so much noise around social media.
Trips I go on with my friends, just my alone time that may be away from the family. It's like all these different things. They're small and they're manageable, but yet it's still time, placed in a lot of different places. So I think recognizing it is a big thing. And then after you recognize, you got to figure out, all right, how I'm going to hone this thing in.
Yeah, because we only have 24 hours in a day.
Right.
I mean, we can, from a volume standpoint, you have what your mind can take, what your day can take. And we only have 24 hours in a day. And you mentioned being all those things or doing all of those things within a short span of time and trying to balance that. So something has to give. And when you're thinking about what has to give, for me, personally, I try to think about what's bringing value to my life, what's bringing happiness to my life, what's going to allow me, as well as the people I'm trying to serve, to prosper in the best possible way.
Right. I think one of the big things is prioritizing what affects you. Think about this.
And peace is a big one too. Like, I have to be at peace.
Right. And so this is why anxiety is such a big part of your daily operating, schedule or whatever. You have a good day, you're about to get off work, something happens, right? And now your anxiety is up. That one thing can put you in a place for the remainder of your day.
Yep.
If
you allow it.
Right. The majority of your day has just been fine. But now the rest of your day is just going to be fucked up because your mind is messed up, the anxiety is high, and you can't get this thing off your mind. And so now you can't go home and be what you need to be to yourself, what you need to be to your family. The responsibilities or extracurricular activities is all a wash now because you are so far in your head that nothing else really matters at that time. And you can't operate as you because for that 10-minute window that got your anxiety, out the roof. And so that's where when I was talking about that marble, it can be such a small thing that can affect so much despite...
It can create big waves.
Exactly. Despite how small it seems, it can have...
Whether you're dropping it or skipping it.
Right.
You can skip songs. Hey,
right.
You can drop this or you can skip it. And it's still creating the same amount of waves that ripple.
Exactly. So true.
So, Tori, Dwayne and I have both talked about how we deal with our volume levels. And I talked more about boundaries, and Dwayne has talked about self-care. How do you, per se, bring in or balance out the volume and the noise in the capacity things can take up in your life?
I just try to just kind of get rid of as much as possible. I haven't always been this successful, as successful because, you pick up a lot of habits that you bring and habits, they take up space too. That becomes baggage as well. In terms of how I try to decrease some of the noise is just by decluttering and purging as much as possible.
Yeah.
And, from emails to, all of the other applications that you have to manage, as well as what comes in and out of your home.
And Dwayne and I talked about hoarding as well. So I can definitely get the sense of purging and getting rid of things in your life. People don't realize you don't have to hold on to these things that take up space.
Yeah.
Trying to manage them is one thing, and trying to create boundaries so you don't bring on more.
Yeah.
But getting rid of or getting these things off of your plate altogether can be very releasing and manage a lot of the anxiety and the stress that comes along with it.
Sure. Because the more you hold on to, the more you attach value to things that have no value, the more it requires your time because you're managing things that you don't need.
And your energy. That takes energy. That's great.
To constantly be managing things. That's a thing. When you find yourself, you find yourself in a cycle, and your cycle includes purging. So I purge frequently.
People and things.
People and things.
That's probably also
that aren't serving.
Virgo trait as well, as Virgos tend to just
let it go.
Let it go.
Release.
That's very good. So, because and I actually do that a lot with things, but I never thought about how I can do that with people. So I have a purge cycle for things that are in my home. I turn my hangers backwards in my closet.
Okay.
So if I go through a full season without wearing that clothing,
then
I know I'm like, hey, I don't need this.
Right.
But I never think about doing that, and I purge frequently when it comes to emails as well. So emails, anything that can pop up and be in my face and cause me problems.
Right.
But I never think about that when it comes to my personal life, how that can affect me. Dwayne, you have any thoughts on purging? What do you feel like? Do you have a system of purging through your life as far as creating capacity or bringing on additional things?
I think purging is always good. I also think it's necessary. I don't think my method works as much because I'm the type that once it gets, I have to let it get to the brim. and then it's kind of like, okay, something has to give.
So you're that stone dropper.
Yeah, I'm forced. I'm forced into purging, and then that's when the assessment takes place, and I'm like, okay, what needs to go, and then I start making decisions. But a lot of times it just accumulates over time, or I feel like I can handle it, and then it just reaches its breaking point, and it's like, okay. Typically, my breaking point isn't too bad, but I guess it gets to the point where it is now recognizable. I see that there's an issue and that some things have to go.
So something has to go.
Right. I don't let it get like all the way bad, but it's definitely right there at the brim. One more drop will do it.
Yeah.
And then I'll start getting rid of stuff. That purge has to happen.
And that's because, we're still bringing things in. And when we're bringing things in, it continues to take up that space. Because that space becomes a cycle of you're either allowing those other things to accumulate, which are taking up space, or, you have to go through the process of purging, which still takes up energy, which takes up space. So the managing, the roles, the processes, the family members, just managing everything. All of those things take up a lot of time and space and volume in our lives.
Managing that and taking up space and the amount of stock that things go through from a purge standpoint, why do you think that we allow things to get to those points? We continue to take those things on. Because I'm thinking about, like, I talked about noise. Do you feel like sometimes we fill ourselves up to capacity so that we can avoid certain things in our lives?
Most definitely. It's like any distraction,
right?
Takes away the focus on another thing. And sometimes we invite this type. You know what? I don't really want to focus on this right now.
And I told you some of mine is self-induced as well.
Right, right. So you know what? I'm gonna bring this other thing in, and it's the Band-Aid. You know, it doesn't really take care of the wound. It just kind of covers it up for the moment, and then eventually we got to get back to the wound. And so it's really about just getting to that foundation of what's needed and what can contribute, as opposed to the accumulation of things. And some of it is pride and ego too.
Yeah.
Like, you know what? I can't, like I said earlier,
I can do it all.
I can take on all this stuff.
Like whatever you give me, whatever you throw at me, I can.
Right.
And I can see that being a really hard problem for African Americans because we're so strong. We're so strong.
And we're seen as so strong.
Not just seen as so strong. Like other cultures also see us as lazy.
Right.
So
we don't want to feed into that stereotype.
Exactly.
Right.
We try to fight that. So we take on everything.
Right.
We try to beat the world.
Yeah.
And I see that with African American women. Like
Sure.
we are considered strong. And we actually, one of our earlier episodes was about the strong Black women.
That's right.
So we bring all of that onto us and we take on all of this. And then we get to this capacity level and, we're
runneth over.
Yeah. Cup runneth over.
And we're also very competitive.
Yeah.
So many people are competitive, and they rather, I can show you that I can do all this, and I can be good at doing all this, and so we get overwhelmed, and it's about a show too, because I can't let anybody see that I'm not doing well or I'm not good at this or that pride and ego kicks in, right, and so now I'm living a show. Because
instead of taking care of yourself with self-love, creating those boundaries and purging things that you don't necessarily need.
Yeah.
Right. I definitely feel that. Well, I think we're at a good wrapping up point. I really appreciate Dwayne coming on with us today.
Thank you.
And sharing his views and opinions on how we are how we manage the volume and the capacity level that we carry mentally, physically. We barely touched on physically, but physically, in a sense, when it comes to our health and our emotional capacity as well. And as always, thank you for tuning in to VNfiniti, the podcast where we talk
and you listen.
Don't forget to subscribe and like us on Instagram. And we hope that you continue to tune in. Thank you.